Unit 1, Painting a Monochrome Bee. In this unit, I want to strip things back to the bare essentials of technique without the added issues of colour. So we're going to paint 4 monochrome bumblebees using techniques such as wet into wet, wet on dry, layering and lifting. So these are the materials that you're going to need. We're using Cotman black. Any black will be fine out of that range, or any other watercolour range for that matter. A size 10 brush. I use a synthetic made by Skoda. An HB pencil. A really tiny brush. And finally, a pot of water. The bee template, which you can find on resources, and a piece of kitchen towel. Right, let's get started. First of all, trace a line of 4 bees using the template provided. We're going to be looking at wet into wet technique with the first bee, so you'll need to wet the bee all over. Now it's important to note where your lighter values are going to be. In other words, remember that the bee's bottom and the mid stripe will need to be lighter than the rest of the painting. Once you've applied a wash of water to the bee, using your number 10 brush, drop a creamy consistency of paint into the body. Just be mindful of the lighter sections. Leave the paint to spread at its own pace and watch how the water carries the pigment. Using your small brush, take some more paint, and this time a little runnier. Add paint to the antenna and legs using the technique shown in my previous class on brush control. Again, using your small brush, pick up a bead of pure water and paint on a wing-like shape. Encourage some of the paint over from the main body of the bee to complete the wing, and then do the same for the other wing. Now while that's drying, I thought it might be useful to show you in more detail how I achieve the wings. Now I'm using black here just to show you the technique, but this would normally be done in water. So now back to our bee. During this time, the black body of my bee has all but obliterated the white line, so I want to retrieve this. Now that the black has dried, I'm using a damp, thirsty brush to lift away the black where I don't want it. This is where I want my lighter stripe to be. Here, I'm lifting paint and cleaning my brush on a tissue continuously until I'm happy with the result. You can also twist a small piece of tissue into a point to achieve even more paint removal. You'll also notice how the paint has run down into the bee's bottom, so I haven't even had to paint that section. On the next bee, we're going to do this slightly differently. This time, just apply water to the areas that we're going to be painting black. With your size 10 brush, add a creamy mix of black paint as before. You'll notice you have a lot more control with this technique. Because some of the paper is dry, the paint isn't running into the middle band. We will still be able to get this bee looking nice and loose with some techniques a little later, but we'll come on to that in a bit. When you finish painting the main body of the bee, use your small brush just to pull out some of the paint to create the legs and the antenna. If you need to replenish your paint, just grab a bit more out the palette. Whilst your paint is still damp, and using your tiny brush, apply water to the base of the bee and bring it up to meet the black. You'll remember this technique in my first tutorial on brush control. See how the water runs down into the base of the bee. Next, introduce a little water around the middle band of the bee to soften the line, and at the top of the bee too. Finally, paint in the wings as before. And that's it, our second bee finished. With this one we had a little more control, but it still retains a loose, fresh feel, and I think I prefer this one. On the third bee, we're going to be exercising even more control by painting our black sections onto dry paper. I'm using a small brush here because I don't want to get any of the black into the lighter areas. Whilst the paint is still quite wet, I'm painting in the wings exactly the same way as I did with the first two bees. And I'm doing the bottom in exactly the same way as before. Whilst the third bee is drying, I'm using layering techniques to darken the body of bee number 1. This is just using a bit more of the black. Labelling your work can help you remember how you achieved the look you got. Finally, on bee number 3, I'm just adding clear water to the mid-stripe, head and wings to encourage the paint over. And that's our third bee finished. Have a look at the 3 bees that you've just created. They probably all look quite different, and experiment with the 4th. Maybe use a different brush, thicker paint, less water or more water. There's no right or wrong, no fixed rules. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. Well, congratulations, you've completed Unit 1. In Unit 2, we're going to be taking it up a level and using colour.